might have read. They're a teenager who is living in apocalyptic landscape, or a teenager maybe who was abused, or uh, maybe they were in a war-torn country and moved to another place. That's what I mean by typical drama. There's many stories like that that really dramatic, in some cases, terrible things happen. Nothing that terrible happens in my coming of age novel, but it does tell a story of what it's like to live in central Minnesota and grow up in the 80s. So there's something there. And the log line that I settled on was naive but earnest teenager growing up in a small Minnesota town in 1982 discovers like plus kiss don't always equal love, and in fact, sometimes equal trouble. But I turned 15 in 82. I graduated, for the record, in 1985. And part of the reason I'm talking today is because tonight my graduating class celebrates their 40th class reunion. So that's how long ago this all was. So where do you begin when you're writing a book? You have this idea. Uh, I want to talk a little bit about that. How long did this one take to write? 4 years. Took me 4 years to write this one. The one I will talk about later has been more like 8. So every book is different, has a different incubation. Don't you hear about the people who can put out a book in 3 months? They worked in a former political administration, for example, and their book is coming out this spring. I don't know how they pulled that off, but takes me a little bit longer. And Truth Dare, Double Dare, Promise or Repeat was 4 years. One of the things I would encourage someone to do is read comparable titles. So whatever you think you're going to write about, no matter what it is, you should read what other people have done, because you don't want to do the same book as them. You want to see how your book is different, but you can also see how they handled that material. So for this particular book, I read Miss American Pie, which was based on a girl who wrote her diaries in the 70s. And mine was based on diaries, so I thought there was something there. Stick Figure, a diary of my former self. That was one of those drama coming of age things. She had anorexia, so she was writing about that situation. We Should Hang Out Sometime, embarrassingly a true story. This guy wrote sort of a dating novel about trying to date when he was a teenager. And I thought, there's something there comparable to what I was writing about. And The Perks of Being a Wallflower, which a movie has been made about. That also had some drama in it, but it was a coming of age novel. So these are some of the titles that I looked at before I really finished this book. And every book has a different challenge. The challenge on this book was structure, because nothing really horrible happened, so I didn't have a lot of climax. There wasn't a turning point, so I really had to think about how I was going to structure this story. And unlike any of my other books, I did hire a developmental editor who worked with me on writing how it should be structured so it would have a compelling plot. And actually, my mother was rereading a early draft of this book recently that was much different. I said, no, Mom, I took that whole part out. And that was because the developmental editor said that doesn't really work. So sometimes you're going to have fits and starts when you're writing a book. So once you get the book written, once you have your manuscript, then you need to figure out how you're going to publish. I mean, you don't have to publish, but if you want other people to read it. One of your options is to find an agent. So with my first book, The Percussionist's Wife, I sent letters out to 30 agents and got 13 denials, and the rest of them ghosted me. So I figured that was a message. I'm not going to find an agent for this book. I'm going to have to do something else. But another option besides self-publishing is to find a publisher where you don't need an agent. And many university presses don't require you to have an agent. So my most current project, I did submit to a university press to see if they would be interested in publishing it. And there's also hybrid presses where they're a little bit vanity publishers, but they will publish the book for you, do all the work of getting it printed, and share the royalties with you. That would be a hybrid press. But what I chose to do is self-publish. And this, I think, is an option for just about anyone. Even if you have no idea how to publish your book, you can hire people to help you. So for the most part, I have done most of my books, for the most part, by myself. I always get an editor. One of my books, I didn't have an editor, but I always hire a copy editor. And I have often hired someone to help me with the cover, but I have done the design and the cover, final cover design myself. But you can hire all these things out. So you have the idea or you have the manuscript and you don't know how to get it into book form, there's help out there. And I'll talk a little bit about maybe how I could help you. It's a very affordable way, even if you have no dreams of being a mass market author, although every author does have those dreams. If you go through Amazon and design the book through Amazon, you can get very inexpensive copies through Amazon. Even if no one else buys them, you can get them. So my husband's uncle wrote a story, sort of a genealogy. I have copies here. Very brief genealogy of one of his family members, and he wanted everyone in the family reunion to have a copy of this story. Well, yes, you can type it up and go to the copy shop and string it together or whatever. You can make it look really sharp on Amazon for not very much money. The author copies are not very expensive. So it's a good way to get nice looking copies to people you would want to read it. I was going to show you a little bit of the process of the cover design for this particular book. This is what the cover ended up looking like. This is what I settled on. But I tried a version where this is a picture of me kissing someone. That copy, I didn't like that at all. I actually went out to Fiverr, which is a design marketplace where I had somebody design a cover for me. And honestly, that feels like a murder should happen in this in this story, which does not happen. So that was not the right. And then I also played with my own artwork. I have enlisted authors or artists too to make the artwork for my cover. But I was trying to do my own artwork, kind of supposed to look kind of 1970s Beatles look. And that I did it all on a piece of paper that's part of a diary story. I wasn't totally happy with it, but that's the kind of thing you can play with. What I ultimately ended up with is this photo I bought off, it's a stock photo that I turned into a cover. So there is some give and take with designing your book cover too. So book design. You can hire a book designer. A book designer doesn't just do the cover. Sometimes the cover designer is separate from the person who designs the inside. And if you've ever used Word, you better know what you're doing with headers and footers and page numbers if you're going to design the interior of your own book. It's complicated. I've managed to figure it out, but an interior designer is somebody you probably need to have if you want it to look professional. But I have helped a number of people design the interior and the cover of their books and sell them on Amazon. Marilyn Gould wanted to write an advice book for grandparents. I helped her out with that. Joyce Kosinski had letters from her mother who had passed away, and her own grief journal after her mom died that she combined into a beautiful story and wanted to publish that for her family, but other people too going through the grief journey. So I helped her with that. And then she wanted to do a compilation of inspirational stories. And so she gathered authors' essays and we put them into a book for her called More Than a Coincidence. This was Dan Curtis wrote a blog that he wanted to turn into a book. So we turned that into Skills for Personal Historians. Our Forgotten Uncle is the one I mentioned that my husband's uncle wrote about his own uncle. Got it published. Looks like, a real book instead of papers that you pass around at your family reunion. And the most recent one I did was Julie Wilkie's book. Her daughter passed away and she experienced miracles during the grief process that made her come closer to God. So she wanted to write a spiritual memoir of that experience to inspire others. So I helped her put that into book form. Oh, now I have some readings for you. Every author has to do a few readings from their books. And I have a theme here that will become apparent as I do the readings, but I'm going to start with a reading from The Percussionist's Wife. This was the first book I wrote. The subtitle is A Memoir of Sex, Crime, and Betrayal, if you're into true crime. It's about my first marriage, and my first husband went to jail in this book. And that's your setup for this reading from here. My mother, bless her generous heart, wrote Steve in jail every day. Her letters are filled with inconsequential news of her garden or church doings or the twins, but she offered her quiet support every day in the form of a letter. Steve ended up reading them to the other work release inmates with whom he was jailed. The hours inside their work dragged slowly, and a little evidence of the homey outside world was welcome. I loved her so much for doing that. The second reading I have is from today's book, my teenage memoir. This is where the theme will become apparent. It comes toward the end of the book when I'm about to go to a dance and have a conversation with my mother. I was so psyched for a party with Scott. I almost forgot about the winter season's dance. I had planned to skip it. What was the point? But Jill talked me into it. I asked Mom to braid my hair because I was committed to not curling it. Well, who do you hope to dance with tonight? She asked. No one. I won't dance. I know it. Not with that attitude, she said. Maybe Brent will dance with me, but he's not talking to me right now, so probably not. Why isn't he talking to you? I wasn't about to tell Mom he wasn't talking to me because I was a terrible kisser, so I lie. He's a dink. I see. Maybe Royce Caroso will dance with me, I said. He hung out with me at the basketball game a couple weeks ago. Maybe you should ask him. No way, I said. He's 6'3", you know. No, I didn't know. I guess I'm not paying attention. So he's taller than I am. Perhaps you should pay more attention to how pleasant someone is rather than to how tall he is. Mom, if you haven't noticed, I'm freakishly tall. Everyone else was into clogs, but they were too much heel for me. I wore my flat blue shoes everywhere for a reason. Mom could be so dense sometimes. You know, height doesn't matter in bed, said my matter-of-fact mother, who, at 5'3", was nearly a foot shorter than my father. What? I shrieked, looking at my mother in the mirror. Later, I told Jill what my mom said. She looked at me in horror. Your mom really said that? Really? Did she mean? I don't know what she meant. I'm only telling you what she said. The third reading I have is from Church Sweet Home. This is the book I wrote when my current husband and I purchased a 126-year-old Methodist church in Genoa City, Wisconsin, and turned it into our home. And during the time we were renovating the building, I kept a blog every day. And I turned those blog entries into this book. The blog is also called Church Sweet Home. The subtitle is A Renovation to Warm the Soul. So this is another one of those, not a whole lot of drama books, but maybe fun to read. This passage comes after we had purchased the building, demolished most of the inside, and we're starting to rebuild. So keep in mind, it's in southern Wisconsin, 9 hours away. My parents, who live here in Wadena, wouldn't go there for the weekend just to check it out. It's a process to go that far to visit us. So this comes when they finally came to see us. As the walls took shape, my parents, who lived in Minnesota, visited. I almost always brought home A's from school, but showing my parents around the church proved better than any report card. Finally, they could see in 3 dimensions all we had been describing these many months. The day after walking through our future home the first time, I asked my parents what they thought. Well, my mother said, we think you've come a long way in 5 months, but you have a long way to go. My 70-something father was an avid woodworker who had contributed beautiful built-in bookshelves to both of my last 2 houses. Alas, the bookshelves are still there, even though I'm not. So naturally, he lent a hand to the church reconstruction project. Tyler wanted materials tougher than drywall wrapping the 2 pillars that held up the balcony. Those posts stood in a high-traffic area near bar stools that might get backed into on exuberant occasions. Dad agreed to wrap the pillars with vinyl board. Think of the material on PVC pipes, only flat. He and I traipsed around Home Depot to find the right stuff and delivered it to the church, where Dad spent one morning measuring twice and cutting once to make our pillars look as clean and nearly finished as our walls. Mom, Dad, and I visited the impressive showroom where I found the lighting savant's distinctive light fixtures. Mom and Dad needed both advice and pendant fixtures for their kitchen. They found both. The lighting savant was just as helpful to them as he had been to me. A successful visit all the way around. So now you know the theme. I have chosen readings that include my mother in all the books. But before I go on to the last reading in my next work in process, somebody asked my mother for before and after pictures of the church. So I'm going to share a few of those before we move on. So this, did I skip it? Yeah, you did. Yeah. This is the back. Let's start in front. This is the church building that we purchased. And you can see it was a good structure except for the belfry. Belfry was falling apart. And it had been empty 16 months before we purchased it. So it was a little tired. And this is how it looks today. We did not change the color, but we removed ugly fixtures and refinished some things and put new doors on. And we can now ring the bell in the belfry. And then this is the back of the church. Most churches don't have garages, as far as I know, but we needed a garage. So we built a garage on the back of the church. And we had plenty of room to do that. And then we built my husband has a 3-season man cave as part of the garage. And we built a patio. So that's the before and after of the back of the church. And it's no good. So it still looks like a church on the outside. I even have the church sign. But inside, it does not look like a church anymore. This is how it looked when we bought it. They had removed the altar and the baptismal font, all the pews. This is what we got. And this is I literally took this picture 2 or 3 days ago. We built a floor-to-ceiling fireplace. My husband put in a balcony over the kitchen, and this is our great room. So you can see it similar, but different. And that's where we live in the summer times. And then we also, I don't think this is on the blog, after we moved in, we were legal to move in, the basement still wasn't finished. And if you think of most church basements, they're huge expanses of space that people have dinners in. Ours was horrible looking, partially because it was old, but hadn't been used. And so this is a before picture of the church kitchen looking out. And we turned it into a mother's-in-law apartment that my husband's uncle, who wrote the book, now lives in. And this is his living room, that same space. Turned it into something not gross anymore. So that's some before and after pictures of Church Sweet Home. And the blog is still out there. The book compiles everything together, but if you want to see how I handle it in the blog, it's also called churchsweethome.com. Let's see here. Too many clicks. So my last reading is from Primetime. This is the book I've written, but not published. I did send it to a university press because I think it's good. And I was really hoping the university press would bite. But it's been about 8 weeks since I sent it to them, so I'm thinking I'm going to self-publish this piece. It is about my dad, who, if you have lived in Wadena any length of time, know he ran the TV center down the street, fixed TVs for a living. And in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, if you remember those TVs, those big console TVs, you didn't just bring them in to get fixed. Somebody had to come to your house to fix those monsters. So Dad has a lot of stories of visiting people in central Minnesota and fixing their TVs or putting up antennas. And, you know, nowadays you throw your TVs away. But that's not what was happening when he was running when they break. That wasn't what was happening when he was running the TV center. So this book is really more than any of my other books, a real love letter to central Minnesota. Because besides talking about Dad and his career, I talk about winter, and I talk about farming, and I talk about the Amish, and I talk about how beautiful it is in the fall. Things that really, different things happen in different places, but those things really describe central Minnesota. So now that I'm going to independently publish this, I need to get it going, and maybe you'll see this book, Primetime, in time to fill someone's Christmas stocking. But my reading is from chapter 2 of that book. The chapters are titled for popular television programs of the era. So this chapter is titled Happy Days. And the setup is about my parents' courtship. The year was 1959. Movie star Rock Hudson starred as a ladies' man in Pillow Talk with Doris Day. The love interest bickered about his dating techniques that monopolized the party line in an era when callers shared the limited telephone circuits. The master of seduction lived in a bachelor's pad outfitted with a high-tech remote control device that switched on the stereo, locked the front door, and caused a double bed to unfurl from the living room couch. How cool, I thought. I being my father. This is a first-person book. How cool, I thought. I was 16. I couldn't pull off the remote-controlled bed, but I did wire up a clever way to evade the fuzz in my 1956 Ford Custom. In a time before police had radar guns, cops would trail speeding drivers over the rolling hills of central Minnesota, pacing them to determine how fast they were going. A speeder who noticed the trailing officer might stop on the brakes to reduce his speed, thus tipping off the cop. So I installed a brake light disconnect switch in my car. When I noticed a policeman trailing me, I flipped the switch, step on the brake, out the officer, ever knowing I had braked. It saved me more than once. On one of my first dates in 1963 with a North Dakota brunette who would later become my wife, Karen pointed to the brake light disconnect switch under my dash and innocently asked me, "What's that for?" "It's none of your damn business what it's for," I said with feigned harshness, smiling just enough to display the gap between my two front teeth. "Oh, really?" Karen said. I assumed my best Rock Hudson imitation and said, "When I flip that switch, a blue light comes on, the seats recline, and soft music begins to play." Karen tilted her head, her eyes narrowed, and she pursed her lips, clearly doubting me. But she didn't dare flip the switch. So we return to the question I asked at the beginning. Who has a story inside them? You've heard all kinds of stories. I have written about the minutia of my life, and you probably have a story inside of you too. And now maybe you have a little bit of a pathway toward how you could get it written and published. And with that, I will take some questions. Yes, sir.
Let's say you have an idea, but maybe you struggle with um, vocabulary or the ability to edit it correctly. What do you think of the idea of putting it all together and then running it through like a chat GBT AI type of sequence and have it rewrite it so that it comes out in a much more readable form?
There is lots of potential there that you could do that.
Yeah.
And when I wrote my book proposal for primetime, I actually fed the chapter I wrote into ChatGPT
Yeah.
and it spit out a summary for me. But you have to proof very carefully. AI still speculates on things and makes things up. So even though I had included the entire chapter, the summary would say something that was not in that chapter, but it would clean it up. I would still have a copy editor or whatever in the end. But I have a friend in Texas who has sort of a career memoir she wants to write. And I told her she should start in Chat GPT. She could, set it up and see what comes out and edit out what doesn't work. But Chat GPT can be inspiring.
Yeah. Cool.
Yes.
You were talking about the sentence that you would use on the back of the book. Did you call it a
log line? Mm-hmm. That's kind of the log line is probably what you'd read in Amazon when you're trying to figure out if you want to buy that book.
Okay.
Usually on the back, I write a lot more than that. Not everybody does though. I mean, it's your book, you do what you want. But the log line will help you, the author, know what you're doing. So you don't get off track and start writing about stuff that's not relevant to that particular story. Like even if you did a family cookbook, you wanted to share with a family reunion, you might want to think to yourself, all the recipes have to come from the family, or all the recipes have to come from a certain generation, or whatever. You'd want to have some idea of what your goal is before you start gathering stuff. Any other questions?
No, but we're just super proud of you.
Leslie who says that, and her dad
Right.
also ran the TV center, so he plays a big role in prime time too.
I do have a question for you, and I'm trying to formulate it so that it's concise here because I have stories in me too. I've got a whole big door. As you know, I'll keep mentioning this to our patrons whenever I have a question for an author because I have this big door in my office and there's no card after no card after no card. So just ideas. And from stuff that I've written, I if I do sort of mine my life for inspiration, for stories, for details, and fictionalize them. Um, but I think it's a bold choice that you do take vignettes from your life and and portray them as honestly as you can. Is there any? I mean, I've heard some things that there's that you've written about stuff that otherwise may other authors might not mention. So what goes into the process of deciding what goes into the book, even if it's say maybe it's a little bit private for your family, or it's something that maybe family members might get upset about.
Um, you're always going to take that risk,
Hmm.
and sometimes you might say, "I don't care," especially if you're writing, like for example, an abuse memoir, and
Hmm.
you're writing about your abuser. You don't care what they think. Um, in the case of like the piece I wrote about mom, she really did say that. That was truth.
Hmm.
And she reads all my books. So she could have read that in draft form. She could have read that and said, no, you don't put that in there. And we could either discuss it or I would just take it out. Or I might choose to just make her mad. I mean, in that case, it's not worth making her mad. But in some books you write, that's an important
Hmm.
element. So my first book, it has sex in the subtitle, and I wrote about some, you know, very private things, and I didn't have my ex-husband proof the book, but it's all true. So you can be sued for anything. It's very hard to win if what you're saying is true. They can't sue you for the truth. So in that case, I stuck very closely to the truth. Um, and as far as I know, he never even read it. So,
Hmm.
but I will also point out in that book, Passion's Wife, you will never see in here anywhere his last name. So if you know him, you already know what he did, and you could look him up. But if you just run across the book, you can't find him. So in that case,
Hmm.
and in Truth Dare, Double Dare, Promise or Repeat, hopefully I look like the biggest doofus in the book.
Hmm.
But I did change people's names. And if you know these people, I know people here know who they are, but you couldn't find them on the internet and harass them for whatever they did or whatever I said. So, because I changed the name, that person doesn't exist.
I appreciate the realism. I think it does add some depth and some layering to your storytelling.
Yeah, I also believe, even in that first book, okay, a great example in that first book, I said nasty things about one of the characters
Mhm.
in the book that I really believed at the time. And that person showed up at one of my book readings. And I thought, she came up afterwards and thanked me for writing that book because she could relate with my experience and had, in the lapse of time between it happening and the book coming out, similar things.
Mhm.
And so she understood what I had said and agreed, or if didn't agree, understood why I said it, and then was very complimentary. So, I mean, the truth hurts sometimes, but
Mhm.
it's the truth. All right.
Any other questions for our author today? Oh, one back.
Yes.
Monica. So I'm one of your biggest fans of your books, of course, and I had classmates.
And I appreciate that.
Yes, and I've read the Truth Dear Double Dare book multiple times.
Oh, God.
Each time when I need that boost of lightness and remembrance and laughter. So that's been great. But I'm curious because I know since you were small, like you were always writing. And I remember when we'd write stories between the friends, and so we'd write, and then we pass it to another friend and we'd write, and, great times. How did you narrow the scope to just that tiny piece of time that you narrowed it to? Because I can guarantee you've got a massive quantity of memories and thoughts. You could probably write 10 books of that time period. How did you narrow that down?
Um, Everyone has moments in their life of before and after. Before you got married and after you got married, before you moved away and after you moved away. And those crucibles probably have a story in them, the before and after moments. One of those before and after moments in my life was learning to French kiss. That blew my mind. And when you're 15, if you can remember that, it is mind blowing. Someone's going to put their tongue, oh my God. And it actually turns out to be okay. So I knew I wanted that moment, but the story is written in a 1 year time frame. I actually pulled from 2 years of actual experiences because I wanted to focus the story on, the earnest but naive teenager and the boy craziness. I specifically chose elements that drove that storyline. So yes, there probably are other stories in my diaries. Having your best friend take your boyfriend, for example, would be a great story someday.
Wasn't me.
But I feel like if I did that story, it needs to have vampires or werewolves or something in it. So I haven't. It's not that dramatic. Everyone has things like that happen. So that's how I narrowed this particular story down to that drama. That was drama for me. But good question. Thanks, Stephanie. Okay, awesome. I actually have these books for sale if I have piqued your interest. The Professional's Wife, which obviously Truth Dare, Double Dare, Promise to Repeat, Church Sweet Home. Fruitful Labor is a story I wrote about my grandmother who died when she was 104, and I used her diaries to write a story about her life. And it's shorter, so it's cheaper, but it's also a little bit of a love letter to Central Minnesota and certainly to my grandmother. For example, that was one that I printed out 17 copies and sent to all my cousins who are related to my grandmother because I got the diaries. I wanted them to have some piece of her. And then the last one, it's so expensive because it's printed in full color. This is my fitness memoir, total vanity project, but it's printed in full color. It costs more to print, so it costs, but that's available too. So if you're interested in my books, oh, and if you have a book you want me to sign, I will be happy to. But thank you so much for being here and listening.
Thank you for coming today, thank you, Monica. And that would be it for Bookends today. So eventually these and the other experiences will be on YouTube, still trying to figure that out. But I think I'm gonna start working on that in the next couple weeks. So everything, if you've missed the Bookends, we've had some really nice conversations. I'm gonna have those up real soon on YouTube. So the next Bookends after this is going to be Saturday, the 9th of August, and it is John Noltner. He's a photographer, and he wrote a book called Lessons on the Road to Peace. And it's a very profound story that he wants to tell us. So he's coming from the cities on that day. After that, Wendell Affield, he is from Bemidji. He is a Vietnam War veteran, and he's going to talk about this really that my patrons have introduced me to, Muddy Jungle Rivers, that has been very popular. Just really just a deep dive into his experiences in the Vietnam War. That's going to be Saturday, October 13th at the Wadena VFW. So I anticipate that will be a lot of people. So we're going to have it in that banquet room there. And then Janet, I have to call her and ask her what her how to pronounce her name. I think it's Price, Janet Price, or Bruce. She's going to be here tentatively. I have to finalize the appointment, Saturday. Okay, so Wendell Affield, Saturday, the 13th of September. October 11th, Saturday, she wrote The 13th Crime, and it's very local. It's about the 100 years ago in Otter Tail County, uh, murders and corruption and cover-ups in the police force, sheriffs, and local governments. So I've heard some really good things about that book, and she's going to be here. And then the second Saturday after that, November, it's December. So we'll see what happens. And that'll be it. So thank you all for coming, and we appreciate it. We're open from 10 to 2 on Saturdays, so we're here if you work Monday through Friday if you want to come and check out a book. And thank you, Friends of the Library, for helping me out by being the fiscal agent. If you want to support them, you can go down to the basement and we have the ongoing book sale. So you can do a free will donation, pick up a book to keep, and just throw money into their box. And that's how they help us fundraise. All right. Thank you so much. Have a good day. Thank you online. Thank you. We'll see you later.